Welcome to the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission's first online public involvement presentation. My name is Liz Callan, and I will be walking you through information about the 2020 review and update of Vision 2050. There is a link provided in the description of this video with more information about Vision 2050 and this update. At the end of this video, please click the link for the online survey in the description below where you can provide comments and learn more. The Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, or SEWRPAC, is the official area-wide planning agency for Southeastern Wisconsin. The agency is advisory in nature, meaning that we provide objective information and recommendations through our planning efforts, but it's up to government organizations, policymakers, and private sector stakeholders to implement those recommendations. SewerPAC covers the 7 counties shown on this slide, which contain nearly 150 local governments. The region is home to more than 2 million residents and nearly 1.3 million jobs. Vision 2050 is the region's long-range land use and transportation plan, which makes recommendations to local and state governments regarding land development and transportation. The plan looks out to the year 2050. This presentation focuses on the 2020 review and update of Vision 2050, which reviews progress toward implementation and makes updates based on that progress, changes in technology, or shifts in priorities for land development and transportation in the region. As mandated by the federal government, we review and update the plan every 4 years. Where are we in this process? This timeline outlines the different phases of the 2020 review and update of Vision 2050. We began the process in the fall of 2019 by reviewing implementation to date, updating inventories, and collecting initial feedback about how views on transportation and land development may have changed since Vision 2050 was adopted 4 years ago. Based on that work and feedback collected, we have now developed a list of proposed changes to the plan. This second round of public involvement is focused on sharing that information and collecting feedback on those proposed changes. Between now and the summer, we will finalize changes so the Commission can adopt the updated plan. As a result of this process, we will develop a 2020 review and update report, as well as a second edition of Volume 3 of Vision 2050, which contains plan recommendations and supporting information. To provide a brief recap of our initial round of public involvement for this effort, which some of you may have participated in, we held 9 interactive meetings throughout the region in December 2019, along with 1 online survey. We had a total of 277 participants. What did we hear during that first round of public involvement? Some of the key feedback under land use was support for the recommended compact development pattern, and support for a mix of smaller and larger lots for single-family homes. Under the public transit element, when asked, 90% of participants would support increasing funding for public transit. For the bicycle and pedestrian element, the most substantial feedback was related to support for more protected and buffered bike lanes. For the streets and highways element of the plan, we heard concerns for safety around reckless driving, inattentive driving, congestion, and a lack of bike lanes, paths, and sidewalks. Also, when asked, 90% of participants would support under certain circumstances increasing funding for road improvements. We also had 2 interactive boards about shared mobility and automated vehicles to understand the priorities and concerns related to these newer technologies. Top comments were related to safety concerns and concerns about equity. Vision 2050 recommendations were developed to address objectives that fall under 4 important themes: healthy communities, equitable access, costs and financial sustainability, and mobility. During the first round of public involvement, we asked questions through interactive boards and through the online survey on 3 related topics: public health, equity, and environmental resilience, to better understand changes and concerns or priorities in those areas. As a response to feedback and in an effort to enhance the awareness of the 4 themes in the plan, We will incorporate more information about the plan objectives and related themes into the updated plan. For the remainder of this presentation, I will provide information about proposed updates to the different elements of the plan, as well as the updated funding and equity analyses that were completed as part of this update. The proposed updates do not represent an overhaul of Vision 2050, but rather focus mostly on various policy-related recommendations that we propose updating to reflect activity that has occurred, changes in technology, and feedback from the public and stakeholders. We encourage you to provide feedback on these changes via the online survey that is linked in the description of this video, or contact us using the information that is provided on our website, which will be shared at the end of this presentation and is also available in the description of this video. For the land use component of the plan will continue to recommend focusing on new urban development in urban centers, reversing the trend in declining density and providing a mix of housing types and uses, preserving primary environmental corridors and productive agricultural land. There are no changes proposed to the land use component of this plan. The recommended land use development pattern is shown on this slide. For more information about the different land use types, please visit the Vision 20 website, where you can see more details. For the bicycle and pedestrian element, the plan will continue to recommend expanding the on-street bicycle network, including enhanced bicycle facilities in key regional corridors, expanding off-street paths to provide a well-connected network, providing sidewalks in areas of existing or planned urban development, minimizing crashes involving bicyclists and pedestrians. A proposed change to this element will be to add dockless scooters to the existing recommendation to expand bike share and recommend local governments address the potential safety concerns related to dockless scooters. This element will also be updated to reflect implementation that has occurred. The recommended bicycle network is shown on this slide. More information about the recommended bike network, including definitions of the different kinds of improvements recommended in the plan, is available on the Vision 2050 website. Travel demand management refers to a series of measures or strategies intended to reduce personal travel and vehicular travel, or to shift travel to alternative times and routes to allow for more efficient use of the transportation system. The travel demand management element will continue to recommend enhancing preferential treatment for transit and high occupancy vehicles through HOV bypass and transit-only lanes, strategically expanding the network of park ride lots, pricing personal vehicle travel at its true cost, facilitating transit, bicycle, and pedestrian movement in local land use plans and zoning. A proposed change to this element will be to add a new recommendation to encourage government entities to work with the private sector mobility providers, such as Uber, Lyft, or Bubbler Bikes, on possible partnerships to advance an equitable, affordable, and efficient transportation system. In the past, a funding gap was identified as it relates to the public transit and streets and highways elements of the plan. As part of this update, that funding analysis was updated and again identified a gap between the investment required for Vision 2050 to be implemented and the expected funding. For public transit, there was a gap of about $250 million. For streets and highways, a gap of about $385 million was identified. Understanding the funded portion of the plan is part of our federal mandate, and as such, we've included what we call the fiscally constrained transportation system for both the public transit and streets and highways elements of the plan. We will discuss this in more detail in the next few slides. The public transit element will continue to recommend significant improvement and expansion of the public transit system, including commuter rail, rapid transit, and improved fixed and flexible transit services, programs to improve access to suburban employment, transit-first designs on urban streets, and other initiatives to promote transit use and improve quality of service. A proposed change to the public transit element is to recommend that alternatives to traditional fixed route buses, such as flexible shuttles, smaller vehicles, and shared vehicles, be considered when expanding transit in some areas. This slide shows the recommended transit services to be provided under Vision 2050. As you can see, the plan recommends a combination of traditional fixed route and commuter bus service and high quality transit services like rapid transit, which could include bus rapid transit, light rail, or another option, and commuter rail, with all counties in the region being served by some kind of transit option. This slide shows the fiscally constrained transit system, which is what we expect if current revenue levels continue to decline. The East-West BRT, or Bus Rapid Transit project, is expected to continue to move forward based on expected funding, in part because that project will be funded largely using federal funds. However, the fiscally constrained system would not include the improvement and expansion of service recommended under Vision 2050, and in fact represents a 35% decline in service compared to what we have today by the year 2050. As part of the plan update, we updated analysis related to transit service quality. These maps show the change in expected transit service quality as it exists today under Vision 2050 and under the fiscally constrained system. For these maps, we define transit service quality as being excellent, very good, good, or basic, based on whether an area has access to rapid transit, commuter rail, or express bus, the number of routes that are accessible in the area, and how frequent that transit service is. As you can see, transit service quality would improve significantly under Vision 2050. Under the fiscally constrained plan, quality would decline significantly. These maps show an estimate of the amount of jobs that would be accessible within a 30-minute transit trip based on where a person lives under the different scenarios. This is one important measure that is looked at to understand the impact of transit funding and implementation of the Vision 2050 transit system versus the fiscally constrained system in compared to what we have today. As you can see, Vision 2050 will make more jobs accessible to more people, while under the fiscally constrained system, the number of jobs accessible will either stay the same or decrease for large portions of the region, with one exception being the corridor along the planned east-west bus rapid transit route connecting downtown Milwaukee to the Medical College of Wisconsin. These trends are likely to more greatly impact environmental justice populations because they are more likely to have limited access to a car, and in the case of low-income and minority populations, are more concentrated in areas where job access is expected to decrease. This is due to the decreased level of service, primarily through reduced frequencies and hours of operation that are expected under the fiscally constrained system. The streets and highways portion of the plan will continue to recommend keeping arterial street and highway system in a state of good repair, incorporating complete streets concepts, strategically expanding arterial capacity to accommodate all roadway users and address residual congestion, minimizing total traffic crashes along with crashes involving fatalities and serious injuries. Proposed changes to this portion of the plan are to incorporate strategies to address reckless driving, add curbside management strategies as a complete streets example, add a new recommendation to monitor the growth and development of automated vehicles related to how they could impact the plan. This map shows the streets and highway system under Vision 2050. The plan recommends that the street and highway system be kept in a state of good repair, and a majority of the streets and highways will remain with existing capacity. In blue, select portions of the freeway and surface streets are recommended to be widened to provide additional traffic lanes to handle the existing or expected level of traffic. The red portions of the map show places where new arterial streets and highways are recommended. In most cases, these are in places where it would create a more efficient connection in the existing transportation system. The plan makes no recommendation with respect to whether the portion of I-43 shown in green should be reconstructed with or without additional lanes. As shown on this map, if funding continues as expected, fewer roads will likely be reconstructed, widened, or newly constructed. Further, reconstruction projects would be spaced farther apart, and additional rehabilitation projects, such as pavement resurfacings, would be needed. Pavement conditions would likely decline under the fiscally constrained system. Also, as part of the funding analysis, we looked at potential revenue sources to address the funding gap. The sources listed here are sources that have been discussed more broadly at the state or local levels, and all of them would require policy action by local, state, or federal lawmakers. The sales tax is a revenue source that is commonly used to fund public transit at the local level in other parts of the country. The wheel tax or vehicle registration fee is currently used to fund transportation at both the local and state levels, and the numbers represent an increase in the current fees. The gas tax is currently the main source of revenue for transportation in Wisconsin. Increases have been discussed over the last several years, but no recent changes have been made. The state gas tax is currently set at 30.9 cents per gallon and is not indexed to inflation. The numbers shown on the slide would represent an increase in the current amount. A vehicle miles traveled fee, or a VMT fee, would be a fee charged based on the number of miles driven. Several states are currently studying this revenue source, but it is not yet used on a wide scale. A highway use fee is a fee charged on a portion of the MSRP of new vehicle purchases. This fee is not currently charged in Wisconsin, but is used in other states. Highway tolling is a fee charged on the use of portions of the highway system. Many are probably familiar with this as it's used in several other states, including Illinois. Also, as part of this update, we updated the Vision 2050 equity analysis, which looks at whether the benefits and impacts of the plan are shared fairly and equitably, and whether the plan serves to reduce the significant long-standing disparities between whites and people of color in the region. As part of the equity analysis, we focus on minority populations, families in poverty, and people with disabilities in the region. If you're interested in learning more about the equity analysis, I would encourage you to review the PDF available on the Vision 2050 website, which breaks down these analyses on many different levels. I will review a few of the top points from our analysis. Understanding vehicle availability is useful to understand how the implementation or lack of implementation of the recommended transit system could affect populations differently. As shown, 16% of the region's minority households have no vehicle available, compared to just 6% of the non-minority households. 30% of families in poverty have no vehicle available, compared to, again, 6% of families not in poverty. This shows that minority households or families in poverty are likely more dependent on transit than non-minority households or families not in poverty. The equity analysis also found that about 4 times as many people of color, families in poverty, and people with disabilities would have access to high quality transit under Vision 2050 than under the fiscally constrained transportation system. Another variable that we look at in the equity analysis is access to jobs across the different population groups. As shown, all populations will have increased access to jobs via transit under Vision 2050 than compared to both the existing service and service expected under the fiscally constrained system. However, in many cases, minority populations, families in poverty, and people with disabilities will see greater improvements under Vision 2050 and conversely experience a greater reduction in service quality under the fiscally constrained system than non-minority populations, families not in poverty, and people without disabilities. Since the land use recommendations did not change, the findings from the land use equity analysis did not change with this update. The land use equity analysis found that all recommendations would have a positive impact on the region's population as a whole, and many recommendations would have a particularly positive impact on people of color, low-income populations, and people with disabilities. No recommendations would have an adverse impact on these population groups. The updated transportation equity analysis found that no area of the region would disproportionately bear the impact of the planned freeway and surface arterial capacity improvements. It also found that Vision 2050 would significantly improve transit access for people of color, low-income populations, and people with disabilities to jobs, healthcare, education, and other activities. Finally, it found that a disparate impact to these population groups is likely unless additional funding is provided for public transit. That concludes the summary presentation of proposed updates to Vision 2050. Thank you for taking the time to view this video. In addition to this recorded presentation, we will also be providing 2 virtual public meetings through the GoToWebinar platform. The meetings will take place on Tuesday, March 31st from 12 to 1 p.m. and Wednesday, April 1st from 5 to 6 p.m. The meetings will feature this presentation, but also provide a live question and answer session, so that is a great option if you have some follow-up questions after watching this video. You can register now for those meetings at vision2050seWIS.org. As a reminder, the comment period for this portion of the 2020 review and update is open through Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. We encourage you to take a few minutes to visit the Vision 2050 website, which is linked in the video description, to learn more and provide comments on the 2020 update of Vision 2050, either through the online survey or through one of the other methods described in more detail on the website. Thank you, and we look forward to your comments.